ADHD Babes, the podcast, a podcast hosted by the ADHD Babes community for the community. Join us every 2 weeks to share in our babes' personal experiences, gain useful tools, and be educated by special guests in topics such as ADHD management, relationships, general well-being, tech and fun, culture, and more. Please note, nothing mentioned during the podcast is meant as a diagnosis. If you believe you have ADHD, please seek professional advice and visit or join ADHDbabes.com for help with diagnosis. No clinical diagnosis is required to join. And now, you're listening to the next episode of ADHD Babes, the podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of ADHD Babes, the podcast. We'd like to take a moment to say thank you to those who've been tuning in every week and those who have signed up so far for the ADHD Babes memberships. Today's episode is hosted by me, Shereen, and joining us is a lead psychiatric occupational therapist for the NHS, founder of She Aspires Skills Academy, and 1/3 of the award-nominated podcast She's in a Pod, Jenny Okolo. Today, we're going to be discussing the importance of empathy when working with neurodivergent patients. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. That was such a lovely introduction. Thanks.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Aww,
Really appreciate it.
thank you.
So, Jenny, let's delve right in. I'd like to start from the beginning. You wear many hats, and I'd love to understand what attracted you towards becoming a psychiatric occupational therapist initially, then following on from that, becoming a podcaster and a businesswoman.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It sounds like I'm doing a lot, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Thanks. So I guess in terms of my occupational therapy journey, I didn't know what occupational therapy was. I think it's still sort of an area that not many people know, but a lot of people have been in contact with just without knowing. So I did a work experience when I was in sixth form. I was still sort of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to go into healthcare, but I didn't know what exactly. So Fortunately, I got a placement at Maudsley Hospital, which is a psychiatric hospital in South London. And when I was there, I met with various different health professionals, and I came across an OT. And she was very, very good in explaining her role, what she does. And the reason why I was so attracted to it is because it was the first time I personally, at that time, saw a health professional look beyond a person's diagnosis or things, traits or symptoms that were limiting them, but actually what they could do at that present moment in time that could help them functionally, help their confidence and things like that. So it was just a perfect fit. Like, it enabled me to be creative, but then also fueled my love for health, mental health, and the more psychiatric side of things. So I did my course at university. I went to Oxford Brookes for 3 years, did various placements in mental health and secure settings. So this is working with clients and patients who had various mental health illnesses, but also were in contact with the criminal justice system, one way or another, whether they were arrested or they were just known to the police or were in prison. So that's why it's called forensic mental health.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and I absolutely loved it. I did a placement at Broadmoor Hospital, and again, it's sort of like, changed my perspective on, just the scary view that the media especially had on mental health, or, people who had, just behaved differently to quote unquote the norms of society. Just allowed me to see things from a very much a wider perspective. So I knew that this was the field for me. So yeah, once I qualified, I found a job in one of the placements that I was at before, and I just sort of worked my way up. And I really sort of found my niche in this area of psychiatry and forensics. So yeah, that's where I was at in terms of my career, my 9 to 5. And again, like I said, I'm a bit of a creative, but also like, you know, into like neurology and the mind. And I met my 2 co-hosts, Bianca and Sade, and we came together because we wanted to create a podcast talking about, you know, all things women in terms of well-being, mental health, friendships, relationships, like the whole thing in an unfiltered way. So that's
totally needed.
Yeah,
it's totally needed as well.
It's needed. And the thing is, like, we were 3 ladies with different experiences, different backgrounds, you know, even though we were Black, like there's still more to us. So yeah, that's been such a great journey. And I created SASA, which you mentioned, She Aspires Skills Academy. Originally, it was a blog that I started at university, again, where women would write about their career experiences, especially graduates and students. But now I'm more sort of shifting towards it becoming a consultancy where I can support people in the workplace, especially those who have mental health or any sort of neurodiversity, again, to help them function as best as they can in society, in their jobs, without any sort of restrictions. So yeah, that's sort of how I'm building SASA, and I'm you know, you'll get to hear more about that later on, I suppose. Yeah.
We look forward to it. It all sounds awesome. Like, you're doing so many awesome things and helping the community, and like, that's amazing. That's totally amazing.
Thank you.
I also just had a thought. Could you explain like what an occupational therapist does, just in case like our listeners don't know?
Absolutely, yeah. So the overall umbrella term is that occupational therapists help people overcome challenges and complete everyday activities. And that's where the term occupation comes from. So for example, if, you know, we work in mental health, physical health, schools, community settings, prisons, and we see beyond the diagnosis, meaning that, yes, we take that into consideration when we're working as part of like the multidisciplinary team with the nurses, the doctors, and all that kind of stuff. But we then take that and look at you holistically, look at all the other factors, all your other interests or interests that you had before that you might want to get back into. And we start to set goals. We also support people in making adaptations, whether that's within their homes, within the workplace, schools, again, to help that individual function as best as they can. And we create like sort of plans, and you'll find them in different various settings. And sometimes it can get confusing in terms of, especially in physical settings, between a physiotherapist and an occupational therapist. But the difference is that the physiotherapist focuses more on like the anatomy, whereas we focus more about just the functioning side of things. So that's essentially what it is. I always find it hard and difficult to explain what OT is, but I think that's probably the simplest way I can.
No, that was a really good explanation. Like, I totally like understood the difference. So you're essentially just basically kind of like helping everyone kind of like in a way find some more normality in their lives, to kind of like get a routine and kind of like find stuff that helps them enjoy life a bit more, so kind of on that like wavelength.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we help people sort of towards their goals, whether it's short term, long term as well. So yeah, essentially that.
Cool. So what made you want to specialize in working with neurodivergent patients?
Do you know what? It started a bit late. I wouldn't say later, but like I was already working as an OT for maybe about 2 years. And I just noticed that, especially within the Black and ethnic minority communities, that there wasn't as much collateral information for people who were identified to have a neurodevelopmental condition, or there was a query. So as an occupational therapist, we do get involved in the initial assessment stages of diagnosing ADHD or ASD, so autism spectrum disorder. And I just found that there was too many gaps, especially as usually this is a condition that's, ideally should be diagnosed at earlier stages, like in school, for example. But I just found that there were so many gaps, especially within my own community. Again, that sort of piqued an interest, because I thought, okay, so why is that? And when I started learning more about some of the reasons and the disproportionate data that we would get, you start to sort of factor in bias, labeling. So for example, like, young kids who might be labeled as aggressive, but unfortunately teachers or professionals aren't looking at the other side and maybe not looking into whether this might be something else, rather than just behavioral, they just don't want to come to class, or they just don't want to concentrate. No. And I just found that there were quite a few disproportionate things that I was seeing, especially in cases that I was working with. And I think where my interest really, really peaked is when I'm still working in prisons, but when I was working in a prison, and again, like, we would get so many individuals who had a track record, and there was a query of whether they had a mental illness. But then I could see, like, just by working with them just for a couple of days, that, okay, has anybody explored whether this might be a neurodevelopmental condition?
Yeah.
And there was nothing there. So again, it's that pattern of having gaps. And I just found it really sad at first. I just found it really sad that I found it easier to collate information for perhaps the white counterparts than I did for Black and ethnic minorities, and that was just the sad reality. And then also sort of speaking to my friends and other people, I found that again, they were just finding it much harder to get a diagnosis or even begin the steps towards that. So again, because of all these gaps, and to be honest, even now till this day, there are still gaps in knowledge, in training. That's why I'm sort of trying to see whether I can utilize SASA to make a contribution, because fortunately I am trained in, let's say, sensory integration, which is again one of the assessments that can be done to support a diagnosis. But not everybody sort of has that. So yeah, it's just it's bittersweet, because of course it's great that I've got that interest and I'm trying to like play my part and contribute, but it's the sad thing is that it's a lot within our community, and it's just so many gray areas.
Yeah, like from what you were discussing, it kind of reminded, like, I'm in my 30s and I didn't find out I had ADHD until like January earlier this year. And then I kind of look back at school and I remember, like, even in primary, like junior school, my house was literally a 1-minute walk away. I was late every day. When it came to high school, I was late every day. And like, my teachers kind of saw it as me being lazy and like just not wanting to be there or just being disruptive. But I obviously didn't know that I had reasons as to why I was always late for things. But yeah, also within like the Caribbean and African community as well, like mental health is still such a like stigma like subject. So it's like that doesn't help things at all. So it's kind of like, even if let's say we did get a diagnosis when you were a child, like how accepting would your parents be towards that and getting the support for you?
Yeah,
You
no,
never know.
yeah, it's so sad, because culture plays a huge part in this as well, and having access to resources, having the language, I think, is also important as well. So for a lot of like maybe the older generation, or like our parents, who all they really knew was, oh, if my child broke an arm, oh, I take them to the hospital, it's a serious thing. But if my child is maybe feeling depressed, or if there's something, you know, not quite right, they wouldn't necessarily do anything about it, because it's not something that's really in your face, it's not that visible. But I think, especially with neurodevelopmental conditions, neurodiversity,
Yeah.
I think even beyond culture, beyond like our parents, it's still a very hard condition to diagnose, because there's so many different variables, and oftentimes it can be it can be misdiagnosed as something else. So like, let's say ADHD might be misdiagnosed as autism, or DCD, which is developmental coordination disorder, also known as dyspraxia, or having sensory difficulty. So there's all these different parts, because the brain is so complex, right? And I think
BPD over here. Yeah. I've been misdiagnosed as BPD until I got the diagnosis this year, and I'm like, I don't think that's me.
See, so it's, and that's the sad thing. Like, you get people who are misdiagnosed, undiagnosed, or late diagnosed, if that makes sense. Late
yeah
diagnosed.
yeah
But you know, so there's just so much. And even the people who are doing the diagnosing, so the psychiatrists, for example, or those who are part of those initial assessments, there is not a lot of training. Like, even in my course, we did quote unquote learn about ADHD, but not in that much detail. I had to do my own specialist training in order to really understand how ASD, ADHD, or all these neurodevelopmental conditions can be diagnosed. So even within the healthcare industry, you will find that a lot of them don't even know what ADHD truly is.
Wow.
You know, so let alone having to diagnose it.
Yeah. Wow.
So, you know, I think there's definitely so many different areas that we need to focus on. And again, I think the good thing is that because I have a clinical background, you know, even within my team, I make sure that everybody is trained in maybe sensory integration, or ADOS, which is one of, again, the specialist training, just so that, because you never know who you can come across. Just because you work in a physical health center, or whatever center, doesn't mean that you might not come across somebody who has a dual condition. So it's really important, and to spread education around it, and then also for like our parents, like I'm sure my mom, she's probably heard of it, but she doesn't know what it is, she doesn't know what it looks like. So I don't know if she would have been able to seek help if you know, myself or maybe my siblings had ADHD, for example. And that's the sad reality, I think. So I think there's a lot of education around language and knowledge of the condition that's needed.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, like when I told my mom, she did not understand it at all and was just kind of like on the defensive, which like can also make it harder to be able to talk to family members about stuff like that. And you should be able to be your authentic self. But yeah, it's a lot of work. I guess it's something to be done in a way.
Yeah, and a lot of people who do unfortunately go through this have had to mask their symptoms. So even the little snapshot of what you're seeing might not be the true full picture, because they're so used to masking their stims or like having to assimilate to society or, you know, school or workplace, that even when they do get to the point of explaining to somebody what they've been going through, it's almost like unbelievable to that person, because they might think, oh no, but that's fine, like everybody goes through that. So they don't actually know the true extent of how much you've been masking and maybe like I would say even suffering, because it is, I can imagine it's really taxing to the mind to basically not be yourself unless you're behind closed doors.
Yeah, very exhausting. Yeah. The mind is just so complex. But to my next question, can you tell us more about the diagnostic process and why it's so important to get diagnosed early?
Yes. So the process should be that you know, you know, go to your local GP, you explain what your issues are, how long it's been going on for, and then they would make a special referral to because not a lot of GPs are necessarily trained to sort of assess and diagnose, but they can signpost to a professional that's able to do so. So they'll make that referral, you get your assessments done. So the assessments consist of basically a background history check on, you know, how your childhood was like through the years of like primary school, secondary school, going forward. They might, the professional might want some input from your family as well, so their own perspective of like, you know, how they've seen you and maybe they've been able to pick up on certain things. And then they would also obviously do an interview with yourself. You might, depending on what symptoms and traits that you are experiencing, they might again include some other assessments like a sensory assessment or a functional assessment or cognitive assessment, and then all of that together contributes to so there is sort of like a point system in terms of whether you reach the whether you meet the threshold for ASD or ADHD. And if you do meet it, that's when they can actually say, okay, you've officially got this. But again, I would say with any sort of diagnosis, there is a spectrum. So you have like maybe your higher functioning people who have ADHD, and you might have those on the other spectrum as well. So the process can be quite long. It can be quite tedious. But as we all know, the waiting times are ridiculous. And I
say that again.
I say this as somebody who's working even inside. It's ridiculous. And you know, it's I do know, you know, some of the reasons, again, because not many people are trained. Lack of staffing is a huge issue as well. And also, I think a lot of people are stuck at that initial stage of not even being able to get an appointment or reach that stage of where they're doing those assessments. And I spoke to, this was a couple of weeks ago, I spoke to a group of young Black women. And one of them actually said that she's been on a waiting list for almost 3 years.
Wow.
3 years. You know, and some people who are on the waiting list for so long have to resort to actually paying out of their own pocket for a private doctor or a private assessment. So it's really, really difficult. The process it has increased, unfortunately. And some people are sort of taking matters into their own hands and perhaps doing research of like the resources that they find online, and doing so without actually having a clinical diagnosis, which is one of the things that I really like that you guys have sort of touched on in the past. That, and I think it's also part of your ethos, where you don't have to have a clinical diagnosis
Yeah.
Because I think it does exclude a lot of people who might otherwise have ADHD or be neurodiverse, but just because they haven't been able to get that signed on paper doesn't mean that they don't need the support.
Everyone needs the support. Like, it's nice to just be welcoming to everyone, and you can all learn so much from each other as well.
Absolutely.
Which is a good thing. And make friends.
Exactly. Make friends with people who you can relate to, or even for like those who are curious to know whether they might have it, like, just being in a space where it's safe to talk about some of the traits and symptoms you've been experiencing. And again, just going back to masking, a space where you're not having to mask. If you feel safe enough not to, it's great as well. So the diagnosis process is horrendous, I will say, and I do hope it gets better. I think definitely with more emphasis on people's experiences with how they've been diagnosed, how long it's taken them, can definitely encourage just the health system in general to take it more seriously, I would say. I will say it's a debilitating condition if not treated, or if you're not given the right support.
Sure.
And I wish that clinically it could be on the same level as somebody who is maybe, I don't know, has schizophrenia, for example, or somebody who has a physical health condition. I still feel that neurodevelopmental conditions are way low. They're not prioritized as much, which is sad. So that's sort of my wish, and something that I hope that can improve over time. But it will take a long time, and it takes a group effort, I believe.
Yeah, because I find a lot of with dealing with GPs, because I'm going through a lot of chronic pain at the moment. I can find also with mental health stuff, like it's kind of like if I had a broken arm, they'd be right, we need to do this, this, and this. Okay, cool. We can see that it's there. But then when it comes to like mental health stuff, it can be like, well, because I remember I saw a psychiatrist for a bit when I had like a low period in my life, and she was just like, you've got ADHD, and she'd been speaking to me on the phone for like an hour for like 3 months, but she'd been thinking about it before, and she was like, I'm pretty sure you've got ADHD, and I can't believe anyone's picked it up. And I was like, really? I was like, oh, okay. And then she explained it a bit more to me. And then I went and spoke to my GP about it, and I said, oh, the psychiatrist said that she thinks I have ADHD, or she's pretty sure that I do have it, and that's what has been going on. I have depression and anxiety as well. And then my doctor went, oh, really? I just thought you were really depressed. And I was like, are you kidding me right now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And then she was like, well, she is a specialist, so she would know. It's just I just thought you were really depressed. And I was just like, I just didn't know what to say to that. Like, I just didn't know.
Yeah, it's very disappointing. And like I said, even the smartest psychiatrist might just not know much about what ADHD is, even to the point of not knowing that you can be depressed and you can have ADHD at the same time. It's not like you have one or the other, right?
Yeah.
Some people can have both. And just like, I'll use the example of where I'm at the moment in prison. A lot of, not all, but a lot of the clients that I work with who have committed various crimes, from petty to more high profile crimes, the more I've worked with them, I've realized that this has been sort of brewing for a long time. So especially like in their younger years, when I finally get that collateral information, It's
Yeah.
like, this person was very, I had somebody who was labeled as aggressive, like he would always sort of bump into people and things like that. Eventually we realized, and this guy was named, I think it was just around his 30s, like early 30s. He's got dyspraxia. Quite bad, I would say, but he's got dyspraxia. And of course, he's also got some other mental health issues as well. But nobody picked on the point that he has dyspraxia. So him bumping into people wasn't done on purpose.
Yeah, it wasn't malicious.
Would he get angry if people reacted? Yes. But nobody really thought to try and explore the reasons why he's bumping into people. And so that's, one of the symptoms of having dyspraxia, not having spatial awareness. And like I said, his was quite extreme. So had this had been picked up whilst he was younger, potentially, I'm not saying that it would have, stopped all the other bad behavior, but potentially he wouldn't have ended up in prison.
Yeah.
So I think it's a cycle, and it's not just from the healthcare side. I think there's so many different areas in one's lives, especially the early stages. So schools, for example, who also have that responsibility of supporting and trying to identify these things at earlier stages. So like I said, with education, so educating the teachers as well, spend the most time with the children, right? And just supporting them in being able to identify, okay, this person is maybe like, your story of like, they're not coming in on time. Like, if this is constantly happening, let's have a different approach to it. Like, could there be an issue with being like maybe time blind? Like, I don't know. That's what I would sort of do. And that's why I say as an occupational therapist, we're able to look at somebody holistically and consider all the different factors, not just one.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. It is amazing like how like if things are missed, then it really just grows and grows and just affects you like the older that you get.
Yeah, it really does. And what did I say? Like by the time you turn 25, your brain's fully developed, especially like your executive functioning. So imagine, and you've experienced it yourself, but a lot of people who are now being, eventually being diagnosed at later stages, they've already gone through life. You've gone through things that's developed you into who you are at the moment. So it's not to say that things can't get better, but it's a whole lot harder for an adult compared to a child, where you're still able to quote unquote like mold them and support them more, because they are children, they're still learning, they're still developing. But yeah, it's difficult, I will say, but education is key on all parts.
Yeah, for sure. Like for instance, I had an RE teacher and he used to tell me off all the time for staring out the window. And he basically just called me stupid and told me I'd never amount to anything because I can't do RE and that's the simplest subject.
Oh my
But
God.
there are little things that I did and I look back and I'm like, oh, but yeah, that's not a nice thing to hear. But yeah, that's another thing I used to get from school. But
yeah, I think it's teachers, and you don't really realize how much of an impact you have on somebody's life, even as a child. Like even saying stuff like that, it carries through. Some people, they start like internalizing that and thinking, oh, actually maybe I am stupid, or maybe I'm not meant to be doing it. I don't know, like all these different thoughts, when actually no, it's not you. It's, well, first of all, we live in a very neurotypical type of world, so everything around you will be adapted to a neurotypical being. So it's not necessarily that you're the problem. It's more about, okay, so how can we adjust what's around you to suit your needs, which I think is absolutely fine. But again, back many years ago, and still sometimes even now, a lot of teachers or just professions, just people in general, just don't see that, and they just see the more negative parts, like you're lazy or impulsive, and it's just really degrading, and it's just so, you should never say that to whether you're a young person or an older person, because you just don't know how it affects that the person and what they're already struggling with on top of what you're giving them.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
I guess I also, like, the education system needs a lot of work. I guess a lot of things need a lot of work, but that is where you spend a lot of your time as well, like during the day. So to not be supported there is kind of like, yeah, it's not frustrating. I can't think of the word right now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
But yeah.
Frustrating, and like I said, like mentally just draining. And I don't have like ADHD or any neurodevelopmental condition, but just seeing from the clients that I've worked with, like sometimes even tasks that might seem simple to me is hard for them or might take them longer. So again, it's just of looking at, okay, what are the areas that you are like good at, and what are the areas that you're sort of you're struggling in, and let's see how we can adjust, adapt, and set goals in order to be able to, you know, get you to that stage. And a lot of the time it's just patience that's needed, patience and understanding and empathy. Empathy doesn't mean that, you know, you can relate to somebody, but it means that you're able to understand, you're able to see a different perspective.
Yeah.
I want to be able to do that. And that's the only way that I feel like we will be able to progress, if people are willing to listen. Because from, like I said, as somebody who doesn't suffer from ADHD, I will never truly be able to understand what it feels like to, you know, plan something and, let's say, never be able to follow it through.
Yeah.
Which some people experience. I won't be able to.
I do all the time.
Right? So to me, I might be like, oh, well, okay, yeah, it might happen once, or, you know, just an odd time for me. But for somebody that is a constant thing, it's a whole different experience. But what I can do is listen and really, really, truly listen to what your experiences are and empathize with you, so that we're able to get to a point where you can feel supported. And that's all that's needed. That is all that's needed. And that's why, like, I always refer to ADHD, ASD, or anything else as a neurodevelopmental condition, because I want it to have that same standard as a clinical condition, because it has to be taken as seriously as any other condition, whether it's physical or mental. It is to do with how your brain processes things. You're not making it up, you know. It's literally, it's how your brain processes things, and it's different to perhaps the neurotypical brain. So yeah, it is a clinical condition, in my opinion. Because some health professionals as well will argue differently and you know, say that it's not, that it's more behavioral, or, you know, whatever that they might say. So again, it's that there needs to be a lot more research and tangible resources out there that people can use to back themselves up as well, I would say. But yeah, like I said, it's difficult. But I think that there is some progress being made, especially, like, you know, yourselves shining the light and using your experience to uplift and encourage other people. You might be experiencing the same thing, or wanting to learn more about their condition, or wanting to take that first step, because sometimes that first step is the hardest one. The first step, sort of like admitting to yourself that actually this is beyond me, you know, this is beyond me. It doesn't matter how much I try, I actually need to seek help for this. So yeah.
Oh, I've definitely been there. Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
As a podcast and community group about mental health, we've had a mix of positive and horror stories regarding the treatment of those who struggle with their mental health when they're trying to seek professional help. Quite often, as you've said before, it is regarding delays in getting diagnosed and treated, or sometimes we do also have fears that we might be misunderstood or even institutionalized for severe cases as well. So, in your experience, you did kind of cover quite a few things, but are there any other things that you think that impedes Black people and other people of color from receiving a diagnosis, especially women and non-binary people as well?
Yeah, I think with Black women and non-binary women, people as well, I think the way, and this isn't just in mental health, but even in physical health as well, but um, we're seen as almost like we're not even seen as being human. Like we can take it. It's fine.
Yeah.
As our counterparts are mainly seen as being like dainty and all delicate, especially when they are going through the very same thing that a lot of us can be going through, right? And I do see this. I've seen this a lot, like whether it's in my practice or just hearing from other people, where especially like in mental health, like if you're, let's say talking about inpatient hospitals where unfortunately sometimes there are restraints, for example. And I think there was a documentary on, is it Paranoma on BBC? They were
I
covering.
think I know what programming you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's on the BBC, yeah.
BBC,
You're talking
right?
about Panorama.
Oh gosh, what
Panorama?
did I say? Paranoma. I'm so sorry. I just put it
on my show. I don't care. I think
what you meant.
Panorama, who they do a load of they cover different things each week. Is that the one that you mean?
That is the one. So they covered a mental health inpatient hospital. So I was just I was in shock, but at the same time, I wasn't too surprised because I have seen behavior like that. But the reason why I brought that up is because you just see the mistreatment of those who are clearly unwell, but maybe because they are Black, for example, they appear more aggressive. We often hear about the angry Black woman, right?
Yeah,
same thing.
unfortunately.
It's the same thing in healthcare, in mental health, especially, where our cries in terms of our pain in mental health and feeling depressed, feeling low, isn't taken as seriously, and we're made to feel like we should be able to handle it, like we're strong, and we shouldn't feel all these things. And yeah, it's very sad. And like I said, even in training, there isn't so much. Actually, I don't think there was anything in terms of the differences in how maybe Black people can portray certain mental health symptoms compared to other white counterparts. There wasn't that difference, because there is a difference. Unfortunately, there is a difference. And it's the same thing with those who have neurodevelopmental conditions. Like I said, you often find, or I've often found, that it's been harder perhaps if I'm surrounded by other health professionals, right? So especially the psychiatrists, it's harder for me to pinpoint that, okay, this person might have, not to diagnose them, but just to actually say, oh, I think there might be something here. Whereas if I am doing a one-to-one with one of my Black clients, it's easier for me to do that because we're both Black, right? And most of the time, they are able to sort of feel a bit more safer to actually say, actually, this is what's going on with me. I sort of relay that back to the team. And it shouldn't be like that. You should be able to, sort of feel safe in a professional environment. But unfortunately, everywhere we go, whether that's in healthcare, in schools, education, workplaces, there is that bias, there is that mistreatment, institutional racism, even within the healthcare system. So I do still see that a lot. And whilst there are, initiatives such as, you've got even now Black mental health that's being spoken about a bit more. I think it needs to be filtrated to the people who are frontline as well, because they have the first contact with a lot of their patients and the people that they're dealing with. So I do think Black women, unfortunately, and non-binary people face the brunt of all of it. And yeah, even in terms of maternity, for example, like it's very obvious to us, and it should be obvious to other people, but unfortunately it's still something that's being swept under the covers unless something drastic happens.
Because sometimes people just don't want to see it, like they don't want to admit that it exists, these things are happening, like, and it's just hurtful.
Yeah, it is. It's hurtful. And one thing I will say as well is that sometimes, and this is more focusing on like the older generation, so like maybe the older nurses or health professionals who had a different sort of culture growing up, and bringing that also into the workplace. So you might have like an African nurse who's worked for like maybe 30 something years, still have a certain mentality around, oh, it's fine, you'll be fine, don't worry.
Yeah.
And sort of downplaying a person's symptoms or a person's issues. And I think that's also problematic because even us within ourselves, there's a lot of trauma that's been internalized, that sometimes we can project onto even the same counterparts as us, maybe because we haven't had the safe space or for whatever reason. So I think there's so many different sub factors that can contribute to just a mistreatment of Black women, and it's very sad. And there is still not much research. There's only sort of research over the most recent years, but just backdating, there isn't that much research in terms of the mistreatment in mental health for Black women. So yeah, it's just, I can only sort of say that this is part of the reason why I've continued working in this field, because I know the impact that I can have on somebody who through the doors who looks like me and is able to see that. And if I can give a bit of reassurance, knowing that, hey, I'm on your side, like, I know, this is not a great situation, but I am here. And there's just been little things that has just sort of warmed my heart. Like if I'm in ward round, and there was a time we had a patient who was getting really agitated. I wasn't there at the time, but I was told they were really, irate, about not getting a particular hair shampoo. Anyways, I eventually went to go see them to see what's happening. And they simply said to me, like, how can I use this? My hair won't take to this. And she was a black woman.
Oh, that's all it was.
And
oh my God.
I literally, as I am now, I put my hand in my head, or my head in my hand, sorry. And
I did it at the same time.
Yeah, and I just said, internally, I was just like, are you being serious? Like, this person could have been, it could have gone the other way, where they could have been secluded just because they're aggressive, when it could have actually been dealt with in a much better manner. So I was able to get them the right, the right hair products, but she was able to sort of explain that to me, because again, we looked alike, and I think there is a really importance in ensuring that your workforce, especially the healthcare system, is very diverse. And I will say there is a lot of diversity at the moment, which is great. But as you go higher up, even me being a lead occupational therapist, there's not that many people that look like me. And I found that even the higher up I went in terms of my profession, the less I saw. And usually it is those at the top who make those important decisions that impacts like the entire workforce, right? So I think it's just really important that we have health professionals, or just professionals in general, that are making those executive decisions and are impacting the policies that are made that shape the way in which people work, essentially. Yeah. Lots to think about.
There is a lot to think
about.
About.
It's a lot. And I try, the way I look at it is that I can't fix everything at once, but like I said, I will play my part. So like I said, I'm currently still trying to finish off my sensory integration course, so that I can become a sensory integration practitioner, and I can start doing assessments by myself. Again, if that helps speed up the process of somebody getting a diagnosis, because maybe there's a one part of an assessment missing, then let me play my part. If I can support people who have issues with, I don't know, sensory modulation, an area which is quite specialist, let me play my part. So I don't look at it as, oh, I'm going to fix everything, because there's just so much, and you're only one person. But there is a space for everybody to do so. So whether that's in the podcasting world, where you guys are doing an amazing job spreading awareness,
thank you.
Or if you're like in a community, like talking to young people, going into schools, or if you're like me, where you're in inpatient hospitals or going into prisons, like everybody has a part to play. So it's just more about looking at where's the gap and where do I fit in, so that I can do that. So yeah, it's I will say it's challenging. Some things hit closer to home than others, but yeah, what keeps me going is just having these type of conversations, and just knowing that we're all out here trying to make this experience for us, for our friends, our families who might be suffering internally, just make that experience a lot better and easier for them.
Yeah, and it's also like, if we're more better equipped, then the future is also more better equipped as well.
Absolutely. And and on a positive side, it's like, especially, I don't know, for example, like those with autism, or any other sort of neuro developmental condition, it's not always such a negative thing. Sometimes it just means adjusting, like I said, certain areas of their life. But you will actually find that these people can be very intelligent, can do things that are just so incredible. Like, I remember, and I mentioned this in my TED talk actually, which got some shocking sort of responses initially. But this was about a guy that I met in prison, and he his offense was grounding an airplane. So he's very into like tech. So he was able to do that from his bedroom, ground an airplane, announce a bomb hoax, right?
What?
So he had to land, yeah. And
oh my God.
Actually, he's autistic. Believe it or not, he's autistic. So
wow.
Obviously, because it's quite a big crime, right? Jokes aside, it's serious. But we were able to sort of work together, and the skills and just the way his mind works, if we are, we were able to sort of put that to better use in terms of, I don't know, creating like an app or going into tech. Obviously, in a safe way, and away from crime. But you'll find that a lot of people are very, intelligent, and you can, I can't remember what it's called. I might have to find out later, but I know there's a shop that's run by just autistic, like, young teenagers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's in the UK, so it's run majority by them, but it's, again, just to teach them about, like, various different skills. And you had one person who was very good at labeling, because they were just so intrinsic, and they were just, it was just amazing. But it just sort of goes back to my point, and, like, it's not just because you're neurotypical, I don't think it should be seen as a bad thing. Where it is obviously negative is if it's impacting your daily functioning and you're not getting
Yeah, for
the right
sure.
support. But once you do have the right support, whether that's in therapy, adaptations, or some people, they take medication, which, again, is absolutely fine to do. I think, you're able to sort of function really well in society, just like anyone else. So again, I guess that's my OT hat, where I sort of see the best in anyone, regardless of their diagnosis or any symptoms that they might have. I can be very optimistic. Like, I just love to see the best in everyone, no matter what. But yeah, that's just me.
But that's an awesome energy to have, especially as, like, I know I can be not so positive, but when you have someone around you who can kind of be the positive for you and kind of, like, open you up to the abilities you may have and, like, your strong points and stuff like that, it's really refreshing and just comforting and helpful to have someone around like that. And you feel like you're being, like, someone is looking out for you and you don't feel so alone.
Yeah.
So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's just like holding the hope for someone who might not, at this present time, have any hope for themselves. And again, just being patient enough to go at their own pace. I think that's really important as well. It's not, especially with mental health, it's not a quick fix. Just because you
Yeah.
give somebody medication, or just because someone's going therapy, doesn't mean that automatically, like, fine. Like, it can take a long time, it can be shorter. It depends on every individual. But yeah, it's just setting those goals around the person that you're working with. And yeah, just how much, what their pace is, really. And again, that just sort of, yeah, I reiterate, like, being patient enough, being empathetic, key. And if a lot more people were like that, I think would be having far less problems, I would say.
Yeah. And also, if we saw more people that looked like us as well,
Yeah.
so you definitely don't feel so alone. Because I'm not going to lie, like, with my chronic pain and stuff, I'm in and out of hospitals all the time.
Mm.
And it's become so much that it's made me even more wary that I am a Black woman. Like, I know I am, but
Yeah.
you can't just sit in it. You have to have, like, constant reminders, like, will I be treated differently today by this person I'm going to see? Or, like, will my pain not be taken seriously?
Mhm.
There's just, like, so many extra things you kind of, like, have to worry about, unfortunately, which
Yeah.
is a shame. Well,
Yeah.
it's more than a shame, but yeah.
Yeah. No, it's horrible. It shouldn't have to be like that. But you know, yeah, we just have to just ensure that there is representation on
Mm,
all areas, in all areas, sorry. So that if a Black person or an Asian person, or whoever you are, you're able to sort of feel safe. It shouldn't just be
yeah.
one race or one culture that's feeling safe enough to get their needs met. Like, it shouldn't be like that. So I think we're definitely behind on a lot of stuff.
Mm.
but it takes sort of speaking out, it takes research. I think research is very important. Having that tangible information to back yourself up is key, especially for the Black population. We're still very much behind, but it seems that, you know, a lot more people are sort of getting to the area of research, which is great. And yeah, like I said, just having conversations like this is really important.
Yeah, for sure. So before I let you go, I kind of have like a 2-part question because they're kind of interlinked.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know if there's any advice that you could give our listeners who may be struggling to find empathetic practitioners. And also, do you have any tips or advice for any practitioners who may be listening so they can be helpful towards the patients?
Yeah. So I think in terms of if you're the client and looking for an empathetic practitioner, I've definitely, if you're going down the private route, researching who that person is, and also having your own boundaries in terms of, even with health professionals, I'll be honest, having your own boundaries with health professionals. So if you feel like the way you're being treated, or their approach or, you know, whatnot isn't right for you, and obviously being reasonable in terms of like, if they're not listening to you, or just being rude, or even I'll say being racist as well, like you have the right to refuse that. In the same way, it's plastered, if you go to like clinics, it's plastered, especially at reception, we do not tolerate abusive language or whatever. It also applies, you can also utilize that right as well, if it's just not working out for you. I will say it's a lot easier if you are going down the private route. You have a lot more choice in terms of who you will allow to be seen by or not. I would also say speak to other people who have who are going through therapy or who are seeing certain practitioners, so that you can also get an overview of what you should be asking. Sometimes we just don't know what to ask, and we sort of let things slide. But if you find out from other people, it puts you in a better position to ask those important questions, or, you know, sort of set boundaries.
That's a really good idea, actually. I'd never thought of that.
Definitely.
That's really good.
I would definitely recommend doing that. And then for professionals, I would say, again, I mean, not to say that everyone should be an OT, but look beyond. There's two things. Look beyond the diagnosis, consider it, yes, but don't let that be the only thing that you're looking at, so that you're able to have a holistic overview, because we're not just one dimensional. Even with a diagnosis, we're different people. So I'll say that. And then also having more empathy. Like, sometimes it is hard. I will say it is ADHD, or just neurodevelopmental conditions, or even mental health conditions in general. They are quite hard to diagnose. I will say that it's difficult because people present in different ways. But the key thing, I think, is having empathy to somebody who's expressing discomfort or issues that they are facing. Having empathy, it might not lead to a particular diagnosis, but it allows you to explore with that person what the root cause is, or what the issue might be, even if it takes a long time. And that's where I'll bring in patience. I think because of constraints with like funding and staffing, sometimes there's not a lot of patience with our clients and people that we work with, because we're normally working on a time frame. And it's difficult to be able to manage that. But I think just the working culture should encompass patience and empathy, definitely. And you would think that as a health professional, you would have that, but not everybody has that innately. Or sometimes and I'll say with myself as well, sometimes I do have to think about, oh, am I being empathetic? Because sometimes with working in healthcare, especially, it can be quite stressful, to the point where sometimes it can cloud your judgment.
Yeah.
But then that's why I think it's really useful to talk to other health professionals as well. At my workplace, we have a reflective space just for health professionals where we talk about complex cases so that we don't individually like hold that burden of having all of that in our head. So I would say health professionals should have empathy towards each other as well as the clients that they're working with, and just be more open-minded. And my last thing would be to say, seek opportunities for training, specialist training, especially in this area of neurodiversity. It's exciting in a sense where there's just so much to learn. It allows you to learn more about what the brain can do, the different things that impact the brain as well and your functioning. I didn't even know sensory integration was a thing, I'll be honest, but you'd be very surprised.
I didn't until today.
You'd be very surprised in how like noise stimulation or smells or sounds or even things that you see lights can actually affect a person's functioning depending on how their brain sort of processes things. So having more people who are educated in that area, I think is really important. And again, like I said, it helps towards that initial assessment process and hopefully can make it a lot quicker and accessible.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that little bit on the end, because I thought, you never know, practitioners may be listening. It could be quite helpful for them to have ways that they can also improve as well. So we're going to do a bit of a episode recap. So what have I learnt today? I learnt what sensory, already forgotten what it's called, but I learnt. Can you say it for me, Jenny? Sorry.
So there's sensory integration. To be honest, there's also sensory modulation. You could just say sensory in general. It's a wider topic because the brain is so complex. But yeah.
Yeah, so we learned about the sensory overload. We also learned about how awesome Jenny is, and she should definitely be at the top. Hello. We need to have Jenny making some of the decisions.
Thank you.
Let Jenny make some of the decisions, okay? Sorry, that's to whoever out there who has the power that might be able to help.
I love that.
Sorry. We also learned about ways that we can make neurodivergent patients feel more comfortable about asking for help. We also learned that it can be quite resourceful, that if you have friends who are going through the same things, that to kind of just bounce ideas off of them, and maybe they might be able to point you into the direction of how to get help or the best person that can help you. Basically, just talk. Don't keep things to yourself. Just reach out. And I know it can be hard, but yeah, just reach out. And also, if your doctor's not really doing it for you, you can request to see someone else.
Yeah.
So Jenny, do you have anything interesting that you'd like to share that's coming up for you soon?
Yes, I will say so. In the beginning, initially, I spoke about SASA.
Yeah.
So, and what I'm hoping to sort of the direction that I'm taking it into. So it's still going to be obviously supporting women as well, but there's going to be more focus on mental health and neurodiversity, especially in the workplace, and just supporting the bigger companies, the small organizations, the in-betweens in helping and supporting those who are neurodivergent, even those who don't have a clinical diagnosis. So I'll definitely say watch the space in terms of SASA, and there should be something coming up end of November that sort of explains it in more detail, and hopefully that you should be able to access very soon.
That's awesome. We're looking forward to it. And November's not too far away, so
it's not too far. And I'd also say my TED talk should be coming out in a couple of weeks. I've been waiting for a while.
oh
I've been waiting for such a long time, but
well, hopefully they'll bring it out sharpish so we can all see it as soon as possible.
Yes.
So just like to say like a massive thank you, Jenny, for joining me today. It was really, really awesome to meet you, and like just the work you're doing out there, amazing.
Thank you.
You are such a beautiful, genuine person.
Oh, thanks.
Like you are so awesome.
You're gonna make my head blow up. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on here. And you know, like I said, you guys are doing an amazing job. You just don't know, and I don't know, you probably do know, like the impact that you're having on people who have a diagnosis, don't have a clinical diagnosis, want to find out more, even health professionals like myself, like hearing from those who go through these experiences definitely helps to shape our own practice and how we interact with our patients. So it's really, really important, especially amongst the Black community.
For sure.
It's super important. So please carry on what you're doing, carry on having those conversations with various different people. And yeah, just bringing a bit more nuance to a condition that a lot of people are struggling with, whether that's openly or hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before I forget, if our audience would like to get in touch with you, like, are there any ways that they can get in touch with you? Would you like to share some links with us?
Yes, absolutely. So you can get in touch with me via, if you're on LinkedIn, it's Jenny Okolo. If you're on Instagram, it's Jen, so Jen Okolo, Okolo. I think my name is JenOkolo on pretty much every single platform. Or you can send me an email at jmokolo@gmail.com. I've sort of supported people who are wanting to go into a similar field to me, who are wanting to learn more about what I do. So any questions that you have, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Awesome. We appreciate you.
Thanks.
Don't forget, you can reach out to us with a message for our Dear Babes advice episodes. You can send us a voice note or a written message by clicking the links in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of ADHD Babes, the podcast. If you're a Black woman or non-binary person and needs help and support in managing your ADHD or advice on diagnosis, please visit adhdbabes.com. No clinical diagnosis is required to join. Join us in 2 weeks for a new episode. Until then, all the love from the ADHD Babes team.